Hello and welcome. You're watching the first edition of Startup Central, ET Now Startup Central. This is Kumar coming to you live from ET Now's Mumbai studios. First up, a look at all that's making headlines in the world of startups. A seminal weekend for Indian startups as the National Startup Action Plan takes off, loaded with tax incentives and special funds worth 10,000 crore rupees. More good news in store as SEBI panel proposes easier norms for venture capitalists. Will this bring in more money for Indian startups? $2 billion babies on the show today. One is taxi aggregator Ola. CEO Bhavish Agarwal opens up on his game plan to take on Uber in the new year. And the other unicorn, Zomato, believes the worst is over for food tech. Founder Deepinder Goyal tells ET Now that a break-even looks imminent. And the traditional IT companies too want a bigger pie of startups. Wipro management plans to up the ante through M&A and partnerships. Also on the show today, if you're a Manchester United fan, you can't afford to miss this one. An exclusive chat with two legends, Dwight York and Quentin Fortune, and both are firmly backing current team manager Louis van Gaal. All right, then let's first take it to the top story of our show, which is about the seminal event in the history of startups and entrepreneurship in India. The Startup Action Plan unveiled on Saturday. We have Chandra R. Srikanth joining us all the way from India, Silicon Valley, Bengaluru, to take us through the key highlights of that. And in case people have missed out, Chandra, please fill us in.
Thanks for that, Krishna. Welcome to India's only daily show for startups, ET Now Startup Central. And in case you missed that seminal event over the weekend, the National Startup Action Plan, then here's a quick cheat sheet to really keep you up to speed with all that you missed, because the government decided to go all out and announce a slew of incentives. So they have decided to waive income tax on profits of startups for the first 3 years of operations. Remember, this is something that was going back and forth between the DIPP and the Finance Ministry. They've also decided to do away with the Inspector Raj regime for the first 3 years. Easier norms for winding up of companies, because remember, closing a startup can be painful and a majority of startups fail. They've also decided to waive capital gains tax, relax rules for public procurement, 80% rebate in filing patents. They've also decided to come up with a compliance regime for self-certification, a fund of funds worth 10,000 crore. So if foreign capital is drying up, startups here don't have to worry, because the Indian government is going all out. There's also a credit guarantee fund of 500 crore rupees, an incubation center with seed capital, and a Startup India hub, which will be the single point of contact for any mentoring or hand-holding that a startup needs. Clearly, there's no better time than now to start up in India. But to really give you a 360-degree perspective on the big positives and also the inevitable disappointments, we have three voices that really matter. From a policy think tank perspective, Sharat Sharma; from an investor perspective, Shekhar Kirani; and of course, from a player perspective, ShopClue's Sanjay Sethi. Let's listen in.
We've been working very closely with the government on something called the Stay in India checklist to stop this exodus of our successful companies leaving India and re-domiciling in Singapore and US. And it was clear to us that there was progress made on about half of the 34 items. And that is good, but a lot of work needs to be done to close out the remaining items by budget time. So good progress, good start, but lots needs to be done in the coming days.
Indian IPO scene is not as I would say vibrant as it is in the US. So most of these successful startups will probably IPO outside of the country, and I think that is one area that was not touched in the conversation. I think the other area that I think was not talked about was clarity on FDI, and I think I was anticipating that Prime Minister would probably bring clarity to their stand I was almost expecting that they would probably say, FDI is not FDI is allowed in e-commerce.
On to some more good news for startups then. A SEBI panel has recommended altering the rules that govern venture capitalists and private equity funds in India to attract large capital flows. The panel, headed by Infosys founder Narayana Murthy, called for easing of norms to be in line with global practices. The committee focused on taxation reforms, development of domestic capital pools, attracting overseas managers onshore to India, and categorization of AIFs or alternate investment funds in SEBI's regulatory regime. We have Vijay Ganeshan Iyer, who tracks SEBI very closely, joining us for more on that. Vijay, simplify this for us and give us the top takeaways from those recommendations.
Krishna, as we all know, startups being the flavor of the season, this committee was appointed by SEBI to see how the alternative investment funds mechanism, which primarily are the venture capitalists and the PE investors, the ecosystem could be much more simplified for them. As you're rightly pointing out, Narayana Murthy was heading this committee with other market veterans. This committee was of 26 members. Clearly, the whole objective of the committee was to ensure, and the recommendations are online expected, where they say, kindly clear the whole taxation process. Let the taxation processes be simplified, thereby ensuring that the VCs and PEs can invest as much as they want in the startups in the country. Also, the whole objective here, underlying objective, has been to ensure that the foreign money is attracted, and that can happen only when taxation laws are simplified. They are saying remove all the taxation laws, simplify the safe harbor norms, and clearly have recommended just introduce the securities transaction tax as it is available in the equity markets for the alternative investment funds, thereby making life simpler for them. So clearly the whole objective has been to create a favorable and conducive taxation atmosphere, which is always has been the biggest challenge or hurdle, if I could say. And we need to also understand a very important recommendation. They are saying make things simpler on taxation fronts, and the alternative investment funds could attract investments as high as 2% of our GDP.
Thanks so much for that, Vijay, for really giving us a lowdown on why this is so important. But we take a deep dive here and really get a voice that matters, a venture capital, one of India's top venture capital funds, to really tell us how this will change life for them. We have R. Natarajan from Helion Capital, one of the most active VCs in India, with the top portfolio names like Big Basket and also ShopClues. Mr. Natarajan, thank you so much for joining us on ET Now Startup Central. First up, I know these are just recommendations at this stage, but when you look at all the norms that Vijay listed out, all the recommendations, does it make you a happy man?
So the recommendations, I am personally very happy, because these are all more to rationalize rather than some radical recommendations. I believe that these recommendations be accepted and I think taken forward.
All right, Mr. Natarajan, I want to get into some specifics over here. There was a set of conditions under the Income Tax Act on the number of investors a fund should have, which the panel has recommended removing. How important, according to you, is this particular recommendation?
So the reason, one of the recommendation is basically that some of the conditions which Section 9A of Income Tax Act say for getting the poem out is are to be removed. For example, this minimum you need to have some 20 investors, it has to be a broad-based fund. So some of these conditions may not be able to be satisfied by any fund. And the problem of this SEBI recommendation was also that at that point of time is no fund could use this kind of provisions. So hence the new committee has done a recommendation that these conditions, these onerous conditions be go away, they be dispensed with, so that there is the spirit of the act is basically fulfilled, and the investors are encouraged to stay in India rather than going outside India for just a decision making.
Mr. Natarajan, one important aspect is also with respect to the alternate investment funds. Now, this panel has recommended the rationalization of the 10% TDS that was proposed. Will this sort of revive the appetite for alternate investment funds? What's your take?
See, it is very important because see, there is a dichotomy between an AIF and an offshore fund, right? In an offshore fund, there is no TDS at all, whereas in AIF they are saying that there will be a TDS of 10%. So if I have an offshore fund and I am setting up a AIF and investing through AIF, then I will end up a 10% TDS, which is unwarranted. Actually, I have no tax liability at all because of the DTAA. And why should I be subjected to a 10% TDS? So because of that, there will be many funds who will not even set up a AIF, right? Unless they want to invest in a non-FDI category, which is very, very rare. So it is very important to rationalize this TDS to get a successful AIF.
Mr. Natarajan of Helios, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on ET Now Startup Central. Now moving on to the $1 million babies on the show. First up, we have Zomato. Now, founder and CEO Deepinder Goyal believes that the government can only play the role of a catalyst, but it's up to the startups to understand the odds of doing business. Speaking to ET Now, Goyal says while the regulatory environment needs to be worked upon, the current generation of startup founders can't expect to be spoon-fed either. Listen in.
The very basic underlying idea of startups is that people have to fight all the odds and get things done anyway. The government can only play a catalyst in getting people to that point, but all the hard work still has to be done by the people who start these companies.
You did not have this kind of a platform when you started off. What, according to you, are top 3 hurdles that an entrepreneur faces, and how can the government look to address this?
I think I'm actually a contrarian when it comes to all these things, right? So I think the government should make it harder for people to start businesses and open companies, because that first 3 days of hard work actually teaches you a lot about what you can really expect going forward in a startup. Life is not that easy when you're starting a company, and if you really want everything to be all set for you when you're starting a company, then you're in the wrong place anyway.
As far as Zomato is concerned, what's the outlook in FY17 looking like, especially given the fact that there are more young players like Zomato in this particular space? You're seeing competition hot up, and you're seeing many geographies not really responding the way you wanted them to, for lack of a better word. So what exactly is your outlook for FY17? What kind of growth are you looking at?
So Zomato has been doing well in the last few months. Our revenue has doubled, and whatever tough calls that we have been taking have been very, very business oriented calls. For example, if 30% of our effort is going down to manage 2% of our revenue, would actually get rid of that 2% revenue and focus all of our effort on what really matters. I think competition is a great thing for any company or any startup, and we didn't have that for the last few years now, and getting all these guys is actually kicking us, and we're actually doing a much better job now.
And one final question, how important is access to capital and ease of doing business? Because once again, we're at Startup India, the government is looking to address these issues. Are these, according to you, 2 of the biggest concerns, regulatory environment as well as access to capital?
So regulatory environment, yes, some things need to be fixed, but in terms of access to capital, if you look at all the larger tech startups of India right now, all of these guys started in 2007, 2008, when there was absolutely no funding on the table, right? So you can't say that if I don't have access to capital, I can't build a company.
Sure.
So if the problem I see with the current generation of startups is that they want access to capital, they want incubators, they want the government to help, they want all these things to all fall in place, and then they want to do something. That's not how startups work.
Trust Deepinder Goyal of Zomato to take a completely contrarian view. I'm not too sure a lot of startups are going to be happy with him today. But as Krishna said, Zomato is not the only billion-dollar baby on our show. We also have India's largest cab aggregator, Ola. We caught up with its CEO, Bhavish Agarwal, who's all set to take on the competition hotting up in the space. He also said the entry into grocery was purely experimental, and that the focus will remain on transport transportation and mobility solutions going forward. He also said that the odd-even rule in New Delhi has really benefited Ola. Let's listen into what Bhavish Agarwal had to say.
Competition is great to define an industry. It keeps you on your toes, it keeps you innovating, and I think that's what we have done well as a company. We've innovated for the Indian context, which we'll continue to do.
What kind of verticals are you really seeing? Because you did venture into Ola for grocery, etc. So where else do you think you can look at innovating and see growth for, a company like yourself?
Groceries and all were more of experiments for us. Our focus is transportation, and we are taking a very broad view on mobility in India. Mobility in India hasn't been built in the past. Very few people own cars, and our mission is how can we build mobility solutions across different categories of cars, of auto rickshaws, buses, whatever it takes, to offer uniquely local solutions to Indian consumers.
Bhavish, we're talking here in New Delhi, and for the last 15 days we've seen the odd-even rule in order to bring down pollution in the city. How has Ola actually capitalized on this particular initiative of the government? What kind of growth did you see, if at all, in the last 15 days?
I think it was a very good initiative by the government because it helps bring down pollution, it helps bring down traffic. And we launched very interesting products at that time for the citizens. We launched a car sharing product, we launched a carpooling product, both of which were adopted very, very well by consumers. So we are very excited about people continuing to use these beyond the experiment of the odd even also.
All right. One final question before I let you go. Now, talking about the broader perspective, what according to you are top 3 challenges that entrepreneurs today face in the country, and how are you looking this startup policy to exactly address those concerns?
Sure. I think every scale of startup has different challenges. If you're a young startup, you always are faced with the challenge of opening a company fast enough or dissolving a company fast enough. If you're a large startup, you have concerns of how do I go IPO, how all those things. Whatever the particular vertical of challenges, I'm sure this government will do a great thing.
Bhavish Agarwal of Ola over there speaking to ET now. Now, it's not just Silicon Valley that finds itself chasing startups, but India's cash-rich IT giants as well. Software major Wipro, which has a dedicated $100 million fund for startups, is planning to up the ante through mergers and acquisitions and partnerships. Hear out the Wipro management on their strategy and why Indian startups haven't made the cut so far.
We have a clearly outlined strategy in where we see we want to be strong, and if there are complementary areas that strategically complement us, where we think that rather than building capability, buying capability will help us propel in the market faster, we will do that. So Design It is a very good example, right? We put our bets on digital, but we knew that while we have great 160,000 engineers, we don't have creative people in the company, and Design It brought that creativity. 300 people who are very different from the 160,000 Wiproids. Celent is a great example. A couple of quarters earlier, I talked about our focus in continental Europe. Germany is, the key market within continental Europe. Manufacturing is the key area, vertical within Germany. And we went and acquired Celent, which has strength in both these areas. Another acquisition that we have announced, we have not closed yet, is Wittios, which is a platform-based business process service provider in the capital markets. BPS is a very important service line for us, but our capability is more in terms of the traditional BPS. This brings us capability in terms of platform-based on the cloud business process as a service. So this strategy will continue, and we will continue to look at assets that we can buy which complement our strategy. That is M&A. On the other hand, the Wipro venture capital is a very unique differentiator for us, because some companies we would not like to acquire, because if we acquire, we'll kill the innovation happening in that company. We may be too big for them. And that is where we take a strategic stake, which gives us 2 abilities. One is it gives us ability to provide certain direction to those companies, because we are in our customers, we are in large organizations who would eventually need their services. So their innovation could be made relevant to that enterprise set of customers that we service. Second is our ability to take those solutions and embed them into our overall service offerings.
Now, Chandra, away from all that and on to something for all the football fans out there. Manchester United's manager Louis van Gaal may be under intense pressure to turn the fortunes around for the iconic club. but he seems to have the backing of some of the legends of the team, Dwight York and Quinton Fortune. Here they are in an exclusive chat with ET Now's Rahul Dayama in Bengaluru.
The results have been encouraging in the last few weeks. Nevertheless, we're still in touching distance of the Premier League. We're still in the FA Cup. So there's still a lot there to play for. Yeah, and it's difficult when we see our team in 6th place. Most teams in the Premier League will be happy to be in that position, but the high standard that United have always set themselves in the past, where we have been able to dominate the Premier League over the number of years.
Coming to you, really, things have been on a roughy patch. There have been, of course, rumours about United's manager Louis van Gaal really on his way out. You think really that's the way to go about it, or you think that he deserves some time and he should be given time?
I think the club's always given manager time. Hopefully this will be the same. It's difficult. Obviously coming after Sir Alex is always going to be difficult, but Van Gaal is coming and he's got his philosophy, so that takes a little bit of time. As Dwight mentioned now, the team has performed a little bit better last few weeks, especially against Newcastle last game. Wayne scoring again. It was more attacking football, so I'm looking forward to, it's all about today and what he does today, so I don't like to dwell on the past. The team has got confidence back again, and it's about what they do today against Liverpool.
Messi and Ronaldo rivalry, always exciting for fans out there. Messi has again, won the Ballon d'Or 5 times, I believe, till now. Ronaldo 3 times. So what's your pick? Who would you pick among both of them? Who's your personal favourite?
I've been very fortunate to play with Ronaldo, and he's a fantastic player, and Dwight would say the same, but Messi's, I don't know, Messi's from somewhere else. He's unbelievable. There's not even words. It's amazing, ridiculous, phenomenal. Messi is just, he's the best.
For him, it's Messi. For you?
I tend to agree. I think Messi is overall, that's why he's won it 5 times. At the same time, we would like to see someone else new comes into it. But with these two guys, as I said, they set the bar so high, as Queenie said, it's very difficult to break into that.
On that sporty note, we come to the end of today's edition of ET Now Startup Central. We certainly hope you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to meeting you again tomorrow. With that, it's back to you, Krishna.
Thank you, Chandra, for that. That's right. We will need to take a short breather here.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.